Google has changed a lot in the last 6 to 12 months, and if your content hasn't changed with it, well, then you don't stand a chance of ranking in 2025. As an agency, we've helped our clients generate close to £10 million in pipeline this year across many sectors, including software, tech, law, HR, finance, and many others. Some of these are the most competitive keywords that you can get in Google today. So with all of this in mind, we know exactly what content works and more specifically, what a Google crawler is looking for when they land on your page. Now, if you're still focusing on things such as keyword stuffing, content length, keyword density, or you simply just can't get your content to rank, then this video is probably for you. But before we dive into how to create content that ranks specifically, it's important to understand that Google has stressed that content must be both helpful and reliable over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. The problem is, how does Google determine which content is helpful and reliable? Now, we know Google has always liked to prioritize third-party signals in their ranking algorithm, and traditionally, this was always down to backlinks. This has now evolved to look at user engagement data too. And we know this because if I jump back to May, there was the Google algorithm leak, which showed firsthand that Google does in fact use Chrome data to build a picture of user engagement signals of a particular website. And this is essentially what they use to determine whether content is both helpful and reliable. So with all of this in mind, it's super important now that your content sends that positive user engagement signal back to Google. And I'm going to show you specifically how we do this for our clients today. Before we dive into it, if you do enjoy this type of content, then please subscribe to the channel below. Okay, let's get into it. So what I've got here on the left-hand side is a content brief that we work with a client on if they're looking to create content or optimize content. And as you can see, we split it into 8 different parts. I'm going to focus more specifically on the top 5 and give you a bit of a breakdown firstly into the sort of principles and writing fundamentals before going more into the information architecture and actually how to structure your content so that you can provide that positive user engagement signal that we've just been speaking about. So let's get straight into it. So the basics, of course, that we always need a focus keyword that the content is to be built for or built around. So this is just a typical keyword that you'd find across any keyword research tool, your Google Ads keyword planner, Search Console, Ahrefs, wherever it may be. We always have that focus keyword that kicks off the brief. Soon after that, we'll work with the client to collate what we call information gaps. Now, an information gap is essentially a piece of information that isn't available on the first page of the SERP of the keyword that we're trying to rank for or that we're focusing on. So typically we can get these from the client themselves if they've got a subject matter expert. Maybe the CEO has been working in the industry for 10, 11, 12 years, and actually they've got a few real gold nuggets that they can provide to the content that helps to add a little bit more value to it. The reason we include these sort of nuggets of information or new information on our page is purely for the fact that Google will see that there is new information that doesn't exist on that first page in any of the domains that rank for our target keyword, and therefore the likeliness that they will see it as adding more value to the user is higher, and therefore subsequently they are more likely to rank our page for the target keyword. So what we'll do is we'll work with our clients to try and collate these information gaps. Some of the other places that you may find this sort of stuff are Reddit and Quora. So for example, if I put Ahrefs system into Reddit, we've got a number of different threads here with hundreds of different comments of people talking about their favorite Ahrefs system, the things they're looking for. Going through these comment threads, you may find a couple of nuggets that you could bring into your content, extrapolate on, and essentially you've got new content there that doesn't exist on the first page of Google, and essentially Google likes to find that kind of stuff. So getting these information gaps is absolutely integral. We try and find, or we try and identify at least sort of 5 information gaps for each new piece of content that we're creating or optimizing. So now we're up to writing fundamentals. These are essentially our sort of core writing principles, I guess, that we try and work with our client, or we will use when we're creating any content ourselves. So to kick it off, always ensure that we're not duplicating anything. We want this to be original content. And I also think by adding these sort of information gaps that we've just spoken about, that helps to ensure that our piece is original, we've got our own take on it, and we're bringing new content to the table that maybe the user who's searching that keyword hasn't yet found. Really, really good stuff. Above the fold, what we're trying to do is essentially get to the point, answer the question, be as quote unquote helpful as possible for the user. So what we've bolded here is if the heading is a question, then quite simply answer it. And then aim to add more detail, flesh out the answer a little bit further down the page. And I'll come on to this in the information architecture of the content a little bit further down. We've mentioned about information gaps, of course. Now, when we're using content or keywords that are leading with what are the benefits, features, types of content, there's a specific way that we look to answer this. So an example that I've given is if we have content that is going after the keyword, what are the benefits of B2B marketing? Well, if we want to be helpful, then we will provide maybe 3 key benefits as soon as possible. So here I've given the example of the benefits of B2B marketing are increased website traffic, increased pipeline for sales, and increased brand reputation. You can then go on to elaborate on these 3 points a little bit further down the content. So increased website traffic, and then talking about the concept of increasing website traffic and maybe how we go about doing that as well. So with this from a high level, you can see that the keyword is a question and we've answered the question straight off the back. Now coming on to sentence structure, this one's a little bit more intricate, but you need to make sure you use the right language that actually answers the query specifically. Using the example of how much does a B2B marketer make, the sentence below the heading should immediately follow with the average B2B marketer makes between X and Y. So you can see that the sentence has clearly answered the question. And I know this might sound a bit ridiculous in some cases, but this is actually the best way to pick up a featured snippet. There are so many occasions where our clients or prospects haven't picked up on easy snippet opportunities because they quite simply don't address the question. An example of, I think, where content writers slip up on this is using the example of how much does a B2B marketer make. The sentence after will either not answer the question, so they'll talk about what a B2B marketer is, the sort of job role that they do, or they simply answer it incorrectly. So they say the average marketing person makes, for example. So they don't actually answer the query next to the question. That's what you want to do. We also have a concept here where we go inch wide, mile deep. So this means that we explore a very narrow topic very thoroughly, but we keep it on that topic. So using the example here, how much does a B2B marketer make? The next headings may then talk about the average salary in the industry. It may then look at salary brackets based on experience. You could then break it down into tax, national insurance, student loan, cost of living, North versus South in the UK inflation. As you can see, this is all actually related to how much a B2B marketer makes. It's just comparing real terms, post-tax, pre-tax, but it's all very much related to the question and the keyword. Now we've answered the question to the keyword right at the top if you just wanted the actual answer in the salary terms, but we've elaborated on it. We've added more depth to it further down, which again adds good value to that user, sends that positive engagement signal, right? Internal links, nothing totally new about this, but internal links are still super powerful in helping Google understand the context of a page, but equally we need to make sure that we send internal links out to other pages as well. So broadly speaking, we'll try and include at least one contextualized internal link every sort of 250, 500 words, broadly speaking, that is. And again, using anchor text that sort of feels natural and flows with the page content as well. So don't necessarily make this keyword rich if it doesn't fit within the content. Ensure that the anchor text sort of works within the sentence that you're creating. And next to this as well, linking to supplementary content. And again, this falls into the go inch wide, mile deep sort of theory. So if, for example, the page content is how much does a B2B marketer make, supplementary content may be how much does a B2C marketer make. And there's an easy opportunity there to link out to that content should it be necessary. Fact versus opinion is very good to keep these separate, so make it absolutely clear what the facts are, and then make it very clear where you're adding an opinion to that fact. Link out to external authority sources. So again, this is nothing really new, but ensuring that you cite external sources, reference and link out where necessary. Broadly speaking, we always say to try and link to at least one highly relevant authority source, and we usually keep it safe with the government site, BBC news publications, Healthline, the sources that you or I will both know about. Again, try and ensure that they're contextual though, so reference data from those sources, and again, just make sure that they're actually adding to the page. They're not even just a nice to have, they're actually adding to the crux of what you're trying to say. Now, these final two sections on this specific part are a little bit more subjective, I'll be honest. So ensuring content is people first, and then creating this sort of EEAT across your content. So what do I mean by that? Well, firstly, making sure content is people first. So talk about credentials, talk about experiences. First-hand experiences are fantastic. And again, you're also going to fill in some of the information gaps on the top if you're referencing examples from your time working on that specific thing in that specific industry. So say you've got 10 years in the industry and here's what you did and here's what happened. That's a fantastic signal for not only for Google, but for the user, of course, when they're wondering, why should I trust this author? Why should I trust this person in what they're saying? When we look at EEAT, there's one sort of key thing that I try and relay back to our clients, because they usually get a bit unsure with this, and it's using technical language where it's relevant. So using technical language, showing a good understanding of that technical language and using it in the right context shows expertise in a subject area. We had a previous client, they were a lash technician some years ago, and they knew everything about the eyelash cycle. So we used to encourage them to write about it, and then subsequently talking about how their products actually help their lash cycle. And although their site wasn't necessarily the strongest from an authority point of view, their content blew all their competitors out of the water from a scientific and technical point of view. And that is broadly why it ranked so well. So do not shy away from technical language. It is fantastic stuff to include within your content. I've mentioned about fact versus opinion. Just avoid easily verified factual errors as well. I say that's another sort of good signal if you can avoid doing that, right? Okay, what I'm going to do is come on to more of the content structure now. So that was more of the set of principles that we like to run through. Starting with the introduction, so i.e. the top sort of 10% of your content. So briefly introduce the article by giving a clear and concise direction of what the content will include and be about. State the topic, question, and then subsequently just answer it. So you essentially want to give the reader an understanding of the topic without having to read too much first. This does sort of bleed into the key takeaways, which will follow maybe the 2-3 sentence introduction that you have above. Now, essentially the key takeaways should be just that. It should be the essential headlines from the content provided to the user, potentially in like a nice light box that's easy to digest and read, so that the user knows what they're going to get out of the content before they've committed time to reading it. They're essentially, we want to give them the spoilers. We want to give them the answers. We don't want to have them trying to figure out where the answers are to the question that they have that led them to landing on our content. And I've mentioned here that this usually works best as like a bullet point list. We then go to above the fold. So this is sort of the top 15 to 25%. So this is where we're trying to establish the trust. So typically we might include an author, will link to an author bio. So that author will be clickable. Maybe we'll have their picture there as well. And then of course we need to be strategic with our H2. So ensure that we're providing the first sort of H2, the first heading underneath the H1, of course, that provides most value to the user or is most closely related to the first headline. And then subsequently, we want to respond to that headline in the sort of paragraph text that follows it. Again, bearing in mind to go inch wide, mile deep. So as we go to above the fold, this is where we're trying to establish trust early on. So we may have our author, that might link to an author bio. In the author bio, we might reference sort of work that the author has done, a link to their LinkedIn. They'll also talk about their sort of years in service. This is where we want to do this. And I think it's a really smart use of space to establish that quite early on. So above the fold, we've essentially given the key takeaways, we've given the reader a reason to trust the author, and then that should be the catalyst for them to carry on into the body copy. Now, of course, the body copy is using the inch wide, mile deep sort of analogy. We want to keep everything sort of quite closely related to the first topic. So even if we get to 6, 7, 8 H2s further down the page. They should still relate to that H1. We shouldn't have veered away from that content too much. Now, of course, you use smart use of sort of H2s and H3s. And when we go through it as well, when I sort of say sprinkle sort of EEAT, reference real world examples if it's related to that content, help sort of fill those information gaps whilst doing so. But the key thing, as I've just said, is just ensuring that you stay on the page topic. The preceding content should still relate to the page heading. And then as we scroll to the bottom 75, the bottom sort of quarter or so of the content, you may throughout have linked to authority sources or supplementary content because it was relevant there and then, but you might also use the bottom of the page. There's a little bit of a catch-all to do this if you haven't already. Directing the user off to a closely related piece of content is a really positive user experience. You may also want to, use a traditional sort of FAQ to address any other questions that might be related to the content but maybe didn't fit within the content flow that you'd created. So an example of an article that does this exceptionally well is an article that talks about how much it costs to open a gym. It's been written by gymdesk.com. As you can see, this article only ever gains through any updates. So let's have a look at what they do so well. So they've got the question in the headline, they've got the author at the top here. But if you look, they also answer the question in the first sentence straight away, so they give a range. Now, of course, they could probably use this real estate a little bit better, but Google can see that they've answered the question before they go into anything else. They then subsequently break down the costs of opening the gym. You won't believe some of the detail they go into here. So they've got startup and one-time costs. They've got lease and down payment, gym equipment, licensing and permits, legal fees, hardware and POS system, certifications, other costs, ongoing operating costs, wages and tax, lease, mortgage payment, utilities, marketing, advertising, gym management software, gym insurance, maintenance, repairs. You get the idea. They go super deep on this topic without veering away from it, but all of this is still related to the question, which was how much does it cost to open a gym? And this is essentially how you want to think about your content as well. So NLPs, or natural language processing keywords, I'll say the importance of these are definitely less than they used to be. We still like to use them to help give context to Google of the keyword that we're writing around. So a very basic example of this, if I was to write about chips, for example, Google don't know if that's poker chips, if that's fish and chips, if that's tortilla chips, for example. So using subsequent additional phrases, or traditionally known as sort of secondary keywords, help to give that context. They can also help scope some of the content structure as well. So we see benefits in using these types of phrases, and you can get them from a variety of places. So surfer phrase, Ahrefs, Google auto suggest, auto ask, for example. We put a little bit less of an importance on them now in certain places, some in more, but a lot in less. But they do still have their place, I would say. I've touched on internal and external links, and then the final part I would say about URL, meta, and title tag is that click-through rate is, of course, a signal. So really think strategically around what your title tag should be. Now, if you're running Google Ads, it may be that you can test a headline in Google Ads, see which one yields the highest click-through rate against the target keyword, and then use that in the title tag for your landing page as well. But as soon as you hit that first page, you want to be split testing title tags to try and get as many of those searches clicking on your landing page as possible, because Google will see that as a highly positive click signal and therefore rank your page higher, because clearly you are serving the purpose that they're looking for. And that just about wraps it up. So if you've got to this point, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions or any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I will see you on the next video. Thank you.